Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra. Market Mantra.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I am Anubha Rohatgi and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र के ताजा अंक में आपका स्वागत है, जहां हम आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार की खबरें आप तक लाएंगे और उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए आज स्टूडियो में आमंत्रित हैं आर्थिक पत्रकार दीपशिखा सिकरवार। दीपशिखा जी नमस्कार, कार्यक्रम में आपका
नमस्कार।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं अनुभा रोहतगी।
Thank you, Vishal. Key domestic indices log marginal gains. Sensex finishes above 61,900 points. Nifty settles above 18,300 level. Rupee closes at 82 rupees against the US dollar and gold slips to 61,240 rupees per 10 gram for June contracts at the MCX.
घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में मामूली बढ़त। सेंसेक्स 61,900 अंक से ऊपर हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 18,300 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंचा। विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया $1 के मुकाबले 82 रुपए प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर हुआ बंद और एमसीएक्स पर जून अनुबंध वाले सोने का भाव गिरकर 61,240 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर आया। प्रोग्राम की शुरुआत शेयर बाजार से कर लेते हैं। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों के कमजोर प्रदर्शन के बावजूद आज प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में मामूली बढ़त रही। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 61,900 अंक से ऊपर बंद हुआ, जबकि निफ्टी 18,300 के ऊपर पहुंच गया। सेंसेक्स 179 अंक बढ़कर 61,940 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 49 अंक की वृद्धि से 18,315 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार में बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स दोनों में 0.34% की बढ़त दर्ज हुई।
Key domestic indices today logged marginal gains. The BSE Sensex closed above 61,900 points, while the NSE Nifty settled above the 18,300 level. Both indices rose despite negative cues from global share markets. The Sensex rose 179 points to finish at 61,940. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange added 49 points to end at 18,315. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap index rose 0.34% and the small-cap index also added 0.34%. In the Sensex index, which is a pack of 30 companies, shares of 22 firms rose while 8 fell. IndusInd Bank surged 2.8% and Power Grid climbed 1.8%. Bajaj Finance and Tata Motors both rose 1.2% each. On the other hand, Infosys declined 0.6% and Sun Pharma fell 0.4%. Tata Steel and Larsen & Toubro both slipped 0.3%. In sectoral indices at the BSE, 15 sectors logged gains while 5 witnessed losses. Realty and services indices rose 1% each. Oil and gas gained 0.8% and auto added 0.7%. On the other side, metal, IT and tech indices slipped marginally by 0.1% to 0.2%. The overall market breadth was positive as shares of 1,752 companies climbed, while 1,737 companies fell. A total of 143 shares remained unchanged. Deepshikha, we saw almost flat finish yesterday, and after that today, at least so far as the BSE is concerned, there was almost 180 points climb, and this despite all the negative cues that are coming from the world markets. What do you attribute it to?
I think what's happening in the market is, I think today there was some palpable excitement about the inflation data, which is expected to come from the US, and the expectation is that probably the Fed, the inflation data will prompt the Fed to pause, and which is what is fueling the markets. There has been a bit of nervousness. But along with that, this expectation seems to be playing on the minds of the investors.
जी, और अगर हम आज सेक्टर वाइज बात करें दीपिका जी, तो बैंकिंग सेक्टर पर हम नजर डाल रहे हैं तो आज निफ्टी पीएसयू बैंक जो है इंडेक्स, वो उसमें तकरीबन 2% की गिरावट आज इसमें दर्ज की गई है। और अगर हम पिछले महीने का देखें तो लगभग 12% की रैली रही थी निफ्टी पीएसयू बैंक में, और अब ऐसा लग रहा है कि फिर से अब बैंकिंग सेक्टर, खासतौर पर पीएसयू बैंक के शेयर्स दबाव में हैं। क्या वजह देख रही हैं आप इसके पीछे?
मुझे लगता है कि ये एक बहुत ही टेम्पररी ब्लिप रहेगा। फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज सेक्टर जो है, हमने देखा क्योंकि ब्याज दरें बढ़ी हुई हैं, और उसके अलावा जो पिछले कुछ वर्षों में रेगुलेटर सरकार की तरफ से भी उनकी बैलेंस शीट्स को क्लीन करने की तरफ जो भी एम्फेसिस दिया गया है, तो बैंक्स जो है वो अच्छी स्थिति में है। तो फाइनेंशियल क्षेत्र जो है, सर्विसेज क्षेत्र जो है, वो आगे चल के उनका परफॉर्मेंस जो है वो थोड़ा इम्प्रूव ही होगा। ये हो सकता है टेम्पररी, क्योंकि यूएस इन्फ्लेशन डेटा आना है, उसकी थोड़ी नर्वसनेस जो है वो पीएसयू बैंक स्टॉक्स को शायद उसने फीड किया हो।
और जो अमेरिका का जो बैंकिंग सेक्टर है, वहां पर जो संकट दिखाई दे रहा है वहां के बैंकिंग सेक्टर पे, तो क्या घरेलू बैंकिंग क्षेत्र पर भी हम कुछ इसका प्रतिकूल असर हम देख सकते हैं आने वाले समय में? अभी अमेरिका के जो वित्त मंत्री हैं, उन्होंने भी, जेनेट येलन ने भी बयान उनका सामने आया है कि अमेरिका गंभीर आर्थिक संकट की कगार पर है। तो क्या यहाँ के बैंकिंग सेक्टर पे भी कुछ असर आपको लगता है कि हो सकता है?
देखिए, सरकार की तरफ से ये बार बार कहा जा रहा है कि हमारा जो बैंकिंग क्षेत्र है वो बहुत सुरक्षित है, और बहुत सारे हमने सरकार की तरफ से भी कदम उठाए गए हैं, रिजर्व बैंक की तरफ से भी कदम उठाए गए हैं। ये बैंकों की बैलेंस शीट को बहुत ही स्ट्रांग, रोबस्ट बनाया गया है। उसके अलावा भी रेगुलेशन जो है वो उसको भी स्ट्रेंथन किया गया है, और ये बराबर सरकार और रेगुलेटर, रिजर्व बैंक, दोनों की तरफ से ये मैसेज आया है। इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स सेक्रेटरी श्री अजय सेठ, उन्होंने कल परसों कहा भी कि हमारे जो बैंकिंग क्षेत्र है या जो हमारा फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज का क्षेत्र है, उस पर कोई ऐसा असर नहीं है। और अगर आप यूएस भी देखेंगे तो पॉलिसी मेकर्स जो हैं वहां पर जैसे ही कुछ ऐसा लगता है कि कुछ हो रहा है, तुरंत उस पर एक्शन लिया जा रहा है। जो पहले वाला स्थिति नहीं रख रहे हैं कि उसको देखें कि कैसा होता है, इमीडिएटली इंटरवेंशन लिया जा रहा है। तो उनकी तरफ से भी ये पहल की जा रही है कि ऐसा कुछ ना हो जो कि पूरे बाजार, पूरे इंटरनेशनल बाजार को इम्पैक्ट करे या इंटरनेशनल फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर को इम्पैक्ट करे।
जी, आपने वित्तीय सेवा क्षेत्र की बात की, तो जो एफपीआई ने जो है, ये जो बैंकिंग संकट है यूएस का, उसके बाद भी एफपीआई ने घरेलू बाजारों में वित्तीय क्षेत्र के शेयरों में अपना निवेश बढ़ाया है। तो ये बात भी, ये जो एक आंकड़ा है, ये भी आपकी बात को और समर्थन करता है।
Deepshikha, if we talk about the specific sectors like Vishal was also earlier talking. So we, despite this volatility that we've been seeing for the last for quite some time now, the Indian markets have been performing relatively well, vis-a-vis the other markets around the world. So which are the sectors do you think which going forward would be a better bet for the common man, for the investor amid all this volatility?
Anubha, if you see, Indian markets, they have been performing well because largely what they're building upon is India is seen as a growth story everywhere. If you look at what's happening in the world around us, the only haven of growth which is seen, and by most experts have sort of said, India looks a shining, bright, shining spot. Yes. And it has been pointed out by policymakers. The other thing is what is happening on the ground is most of the sectors in India, they are reaching that capacity wherein the private capex cycle may turn around. So that moment has come wherein people are sort of seeing that growth which will come about. So some of the key sectors which would sort of benefit from this, definitely the infrastructure sectors, there's government capex program also. Then the machinery sector, some of the financial services sector, because there would be demand for credit offtake is already increased. So these are some of the sectors going forward which will do well.
And of course, you're talking about the India growth story, and yesterday the global rating agency Fitch came out and it has retained India's BBB- rating. In fact, and it has at a stable outlook, but it has also pointed to the fact that the India's growth may be affected by elevated inflation, subdued global demand, and high interest rates. So how do you see that?
See, if you look at the second part of their what the Fitch said on the growth particularly, they've highlighted some of the concerns, some of the risk factors which could play out. But if you actually see what's happening on the ground, retail inflation's begun to cool. And that RBI has already sort of taken a pause in interest rates. So going forward, that on the ground may not be such a big risk. And so I think the India growth story remains quite robust at this juncture. So while, concerns are always there, global growth is not supporting this growth. So that factor will play out. But definitely domestically, I think India's story is quite robust.
And you were talking about the infrastructure sector a little while ago while talking about the sectors, different sectors which may yield a better result. So let's talk about some of the results that have come out, Q4 results. Engineering and construction major Larsen & Toubro Limited, L&T, today said its consolidated net profit jumped 10% year-on-year to 3,987 crore rupees for the March quarter. The company reported a 3,621 crore rupee profit in the same quarter last year. Revenue for the quarter rose 10% year-on-year to 58,335 crore rupees compared with 52,851 crore rupees in the corresponding quarter last year. How do you view this result that has come out for L&T? Along the expected lines, lower than estimations? What would you say? I
think the result has been along the expected lines, and the infrastructure company, particularly Larsen & Toubro, which has a very good order book. So while the results are speaking about the past, the last quarter that ended, L&T as a future, as a company with a huge, supported by a huge government capex plan, it looks pretty robust. And I think from the investor point of view, I think these results are pretty reasonable. So going forward, I think its performance would be linked to what happens in the infrastructure sector. And with a large capex plan there unfolding in every area, it is expected that the infra stocks would definitely do well. And let's talk about one more result. Fast-moving consumer goods major Godrej Consumer Products today posted a profit after tax of 452 crore rupees for the March quarter, beating estimates. This was 24.5% higher compared to 363 crore rupees in the year-ago period. The FMCG company's revenue growth came in at 9% to 3,200 crore rupees as against 2,916 crore rupees in the same quarter of last fiscal. Deepshikha, FMCG company, and they're showing a result. It's quite a bit, 24.5% higher than the same period last year. So what does it say about the overall domestic, the health of the domestic economy? So, if you remember during COVID, there was a lot of pressure on the consumer goods sector, especially the FMCG, and we were hearing there is a lot of stress which is coming along on the demand side. But what we've seen is post-pandemic, the recovery in demand has been pretty robust, and we can see the impact in the FMCG sector immediately. We can see it in consumer goods. We can see it in passenger vehicles. So the domestic consumer demand has remained very robust. Going forward, it is expected that, if we have a reasonable monsoon, and it looks like with all the predictions around the corner, and the results as they're coming out, company results, going forward, it is expected that the sector would probably do better. And now let's hear about how the rupee behaved vis-a-vis the US dollar from Vishal.
विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज 82 रुपए प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की स्थिति दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में 101.76 पर चल रहा था।
And moving on with the Asian and European markets again from Vishal.
एशियाई शेयर बाजार आज नुकसान में रहे। सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के सपाट बंद हुआ। चीन के शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स में 1.2% की गिरावट दर्ज हुई। हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग और दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी दोनों 0.5% लुढ़क गए। जापान का निकेई 0.4% के नुकसान में रहा। अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में भी मामूली गिरावट का रुख था। समाचार लिखे जाने तक लंदन का FTSE 100, जर्मनी का डैक्स और फ्रांस का कैक 0.2% के नुकसान में चल रहे थे।
Moving on to the US market, US stock indices closed lower yesterday as investors grew more cautious ahead of a US consumer price index report and a meeting between US political leaders to discuss the debt ceiling. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.2%, the S&P 500 declined 0.5%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index ended 0.6% down. Deepshikha, we were talking about you mentioned the US Consumer Price Index figures which are due later today. So what is your, expectation? Because do you think, because of data, whatever data comes out, will also reveal whether the Fed's aggressive stance so far vis-a-vis the rate hikes are concerned is actually yielding result and actually has resulted in curbing the prices?
Anup, the situation in US is, I think it's intimidating everybody and it's puzzling everyone because if you look at the employment data continues to be robust despite, such sharp hikes, such sharp messages from the US Fed. So retail inflation data today, we saw it drove, this whole nervousness in the markets everywhere, US and also the Asian markets, Asian and European markets. So, but the latest signals that one is getting from the US Fed is that they may not go in for, such an aggressive tightening after what happened in the banking sector. We've seen fallouts. So, going forward, that looks difficult, and I think which is what the market was sort of expecting the retail inflation to give that kind of a direction, that kind of an assurance probably that the pause or the less aggression of the US Fed will probably hold on, and that is getting priced into the market. That's been taken into account by the markets everywhere.
In fact, Fed Chairman, Jerome Powell has said that it is now an open question. After the last meeting, he said that it is now an open question on whether further rate increases will be warranted in an economy which is still facing high inflation but also showing signs of a slowdown. So that in a way, do you think he's given some kind of an indication that he may go easy?
I think it is a very tough call for the Fed as well because you have these signs of banking collapses happening which obviously are showing that there is a growing stress, even though it may be limited to some sectors. But employment data, retail inflation data, and which is why retail inflation numbers of today are going to be keenly watched, they're keenly waited for. So will that sort of warrant an aggressive stance, which I think he's clearly ruling out. Yes. That aggression is ruled out totally. So I think possibly smaller, less aggressive hikes or maybe a pause is what everyone expects him to sort of go for.
और घरेलू मोर्चे पर अगर हम बात करें तो क्या ये जो ब्याज दरों में बढ़ोतरी का सिलसिला यहाँ पर भी अब रुका रहेगा? हम उम्मीद कर सकते हैं क्योंकि महंगाई तो अभी काबू में दिख रही है, चाहे वो खुदरा हो या थोक हो।
बिल्कुल विशाल जी, आरबीआई जो है वो पहले ही ये इंडिकेशन दे चुका है कि अब शायद पॉज ले लिया गया है और जिस तरह के डेटा जिस तरह का आ रहा है, हमने देखा कि जो एडिबल ऑयल्स हैं, खाद्य तेल जो हैं, उनके दाम जो हैं वो काफी कम हो गए हैं और सरकार की तरफ से जो कंपनियां हैं उनको ये मैसेज गया था कि आप अपने दाम घटाइए ताकि जो आम आदमी है, कंज्यूमर है, उसको ये घटी हुई दरों का फायदा मिल सके। तो ऐसा लगता नहीं है कि अब दरों में कोई वृद्धि की जाएगी। अब तो बातचीत हो रही है कि क्या अब हमें वापसी जो है रास्ता शुरू करना चाहिए, तय करना चाहिए कटौती का। तो वृद्धि वाला दौर तो अब नहीं लगता है कि
Deepshikha, coming back to the US markets were also responding to, there's this whole talk about this US debt ceiling issue. So what exactly, is the issue and what kind of implications does it have for the world's largest economy as well the fallout on the rest of the world?
Anubha, I wouldn't read too much into the debt ceiling because it is a repetitive phenomenon in US.
Yes.
The Congress doesn't do it and then they have this whole thing about getting it cleared overnight and in very short span and it gets cleared. So I don't think the lawmakers there are not going to clear it. It would be cleared. But yeah, it does create a bit of nervousness and uncertainty for people around, for the market especially, because when the other cues are negative, any more negativity sort of impacts the overall sentiment. But I think Treasury Secretary's already made a very strong pitch. President's also made a very strong pitch today. So the debt ceiling's definitely getting cleared.
And it's more of a, give and take between the Republicans and the Biden administration.
Exactly. It's largely a political show.
Right. Moving on to commodities, oil prices today fell around 1%, ending a 3-day rally as an unexpected rise in U.S. oil inventories sparked demand concerns. Investors are also awaiting inflation data for cues on U.S. interest rates. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $76.80 per barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude price was at $73 per barrel when reports last came in. Deepshikha, we're seeing that the international crude prices are at the moment at a point where, it was factored in our budget, the budget for this year. So all in all, it's a good, the news coming out on this front is a good news for India.
Definitely very good news for India and Indian policy makers, I think, and good on all fronts because high crude prices feed into inflation. They impact our overall imports. So everything, crude, if remains at a reasonable level, is very good news for Indian policy makers. But I think overall the expectation which is sort of building on crude, although it remains a very uncertain area and a very sensitive commodity, but if nothing, war is still an uncertainty in Europe, which is sort of there. But otherwise, it looks like it will probably hover around the same range. So definitely good news for India.
But what about the OPEC Plus has already said that there's going to be a production cut in production. So wouldn't it, because they are of course trying to maintain a certain price level so far as the crude prices, international crude prices are concerned. Would that have the effect of would that affect the international crude prices and give rise to volatility?
So, if you look at the price movement, this price movement is despite the OPEC Plus going hammer and tongs that we will cut production. So, definitely the markets have priced in that the OPEC Plus is going to cut. India also has this advantage of the Russian crude, which we have been relying on. So, although, that will continue, of course, but, crude is an uncertainty which India has to live because obviously we are largely import dependent. So any movement, upward movement we are very sensitive to. But as of now, it looks like the band remains within reasonable levels.
And, when we're talking about oil, I was also reading somewhere the figures have come out that India's diesel consumption in April hit a record 7.8 million tons, aided by robust industrial and farm activities, which is like, again, coming back to the overall economy, the picture of economy. It's a good sign. And, like we discussed earlier in the program, the FIIs are coming back to India. We are seeing the domestic consumption is going up. And yet one more news that Foxconn has now bought, around 300 acres of land in Bangalore and iPhone manufacturer. So overall, you think, the overall when it comes to investments, overall when it comes to international investments and the international companies coming to India, it's a good, it's a good phase for India right now.
Definitely. If you actually look and we just discussed the Fitch report which came out yesterday, and if you look at the other reports, which had come out, if you saw the IMF report, if you saw the World Bank assessment, if you speak to experts, all around, if you see and if you look at the data coming out from other countries, India really stands out. Its economy has withstood huge shock of the pandemic, huge shock of what was happening in the advanced economies. So definitely, I think the measured response on the hindsight, there was criticism of the government then that they did not really open their purse strings. But on the hindsight, if you see the measured response to pandemic at that juncture, the policy reforms that the government undertook to spur manufacturing in the country, to spur investment in the country, all these seem to be showing results. We've seen robust GST numbers. We've seen robust passenger vehicle sales numbers. PMI manufacturing, PMI services. These sectors, the economy on the ground, though it might moderate because the developed economies are not offering that kind of a support, but on the ground the economy looks like it's really holding on its own.
जी. और अब बात कर लेते हैं कीमती धातुओं की। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में जून में आपूर्ति किए जाने वाले सोने का मूल्य आज 180 रुपए गिरकर 61,240 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम के आसपास चल रहा था। वहीं दूसरी तरफ जुलाई नुबंध वाली चांदी 260 रुपए टूटकर 77,200 रुपए प्रति किलो पर कारोबार कर रही थी। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजार में न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में सोना मंदी के साथ $2,035.70 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रहा था। चांदी भी गिरावट के साथ $25.80 प्रति औंस पर चल रही थी। दीपशिखा जी, अगर सोने के बारे में, गोल्ड के बारे में बात करें तो पिछले 1.5 साल में हम देख रहे हैं 47,000 48,000 से बढ़ता हुआ सोना 62,000 और 61,000 और 62,000 के बीच में चल रहा है। तो अभी हम इसको और आगे बढ़ता हुआ देखेंगे सोने की कीमतें?
विशाल जी, सोना जो है वो देखता है कि अर्थव्यवस्था जो है विश्व की वो किस दिशा में जा रही है। और इस समय अगर आप देखें, भारत जो है, भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था तो काफी मजबूत दिखाई दे रही है, लेकिन अगर आप बाकी देशों की और खास तौर से अगर आप देखें अमेरिका की स्थिति या यूरोप की स्थिति, तो वहां पे वो मजबूती नहीं है अर्थव्यवस्था में। वहां पर महंगाई जो है अभी भी एक बहुत कठिन सा चैलेंज है, चुनौती है उनके सामने। तो जब तक वो रहेगी चुनौती विश्व के सामने, सबसे ज्यादा असर उसका सोने पर आता है। तो जाहिर सी बात है कि उसका असर अगर रहेगा तो, और ऐसा कहा जा रहा है कि जो एडवांस इकोनॉमीज हैं उनमें साल भर तक तो ये स्लो डाउन रहेगा, उसके बाद थोड़ा सा रिकवरी शायद आए। तो साल भर तक तो ये कहा जाता है कि सोना जो है, मतलब ये अनसर्टेनिटी सोने के ऊपर रहेगी अभी।
But then, do you think that this the price rise and the way the gold prices have been going on, will they take the shine off gold as an investment?
I don't think gold is losing its sheen as an investment. In fact, if you see, it has the investor interest really turned towards gold for obvious reasons, because there was high inflation everywhere. So if the Western world, re-enters into, if the inflation really comes down, re-enters into a low inflation zone, I think that will have an impact on the yellow metal. But until then, it looks really difficult.
And do you think that's one of the reasons? I mean, I was reading a report today. The RBI is also, buying up gold. So, because again, gold as a safe haven. So that's a reason. Do you think that's a reason that the central bank is also,
most central banks have bought gold. Most central banks have increased their reserves, and obviously, when there is uncertainty in the world all around, they like to sort of gold is the key hedge. So obviously they all try to sort of accumulate gold.
और जिस तरीके से चांदी की कीमतें 77,000 के आसपास चल रही हैं और जिस तरीके से प्री कोविड लेवल से के पार ही पहुंच गई हैं अब इंडस्ट्रियल एक्टिविटीज भी, प्रोडक्शन भी, तो आपको क्या लगता है कि चांदी में जो है, जाहिर सी बात है कि उसकी डिमांड भी इंडस्ट्री के लिए भी बढ़ रही है, तो चांदी में इन्वेस्टमेंट निवेश की दृष्टि से अगर देखें तो अच्छा रहेगा?
चांदी के बारे में जो अचानक से हमने पिछले 1 साल 1.5 साल में देखा, चांदी में बहुत ज्यादा इन्वेस्टर इंटरेस्ट आया है और हमने जो बढ़ोतरी होती हुई देखी है कीमतों में, उसके हिसाब से वो चल रही है। तो चांदी के लिए कहा जा रहा है कि आगे जो है चांदी जो है, जैसे गोल्ड एक लार्ज इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रोडक्ट की तरह उभरा था, वैसे ही चांदी जो है एक अच्छा इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑप्शन की तरह उभरा है निवेशकों के लिए।
I'll come back to the first news that we discussed, and that was a very quick answer from you. That was about the Indian equity markets. Analysts have been saying again and again that Indian equities are overpriced. What is your take on that?
Well, it is, at what is the level that, analysts are looking at. There would be some who would be seeing Sensex at 70,000, say, touching in a few months from now. So, we may be overpriced at some level, but it may, it's still, India remains a very attractive market, and the FPI flows are definitely demonstrating that.
दीपशिखा सिकरवार जी, कार्यक्रम में आने और हमसे चर्चा करने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद.
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. Key domestic indices log marginal gains. Sensex finishes above 61,900 points. Nifty settles above 18,300 level. Rupee closes at 82 rupees against the US dollar, and gold slips to 61,240 rupees per 10 gram for June contracts at MCX. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. We'll be back tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Till then, namaskar.
Market Mantra. Market Mantra.